The forms were not going to fill themselves. Dara Voss sat at a folding table inside a crumbling relief station at the edge of Talhari space, filling out supply request forms by hand, because the station's data system had been knocked offline 3 days ago and nobody had come to fix it. A distant rumble moved through the walls. She did not look up. Ren walked in from the side corridor, carrying 2 ration packs and a face that said things were not improving. He dropped 1 pack in front of her and sat down on an overturned crate. "The Valorian crew left an hour ago," he said. "I know," Dara said. She kept writing. "The Talhari count is up to 400 in the lower bay. Maybe more coming in from the east settlement." "I know that too." Ren opened his ration pack. He looked at the ceiling, which had a long crack running across it from the last Orin-ranging shot. "The council voted this morning," he said. Dara stopped writing, and no intervention, too far out, too costly, not a member world. She put her pen down, not in anger. She just needed both hands to open her own ration pack. Then she picked the pen back up and kept writing. That was the thing about Dara that most people missed the first time they met her. She did not react the way you expected. She did not raise her voice or slam a fist on the table. She just absorbed it, like the information was being filed away somewhere useful, and then she kept moving. The Talhari station had been a midpoint supply hub before the Orin decided they wanted the system. Small species, the Talhari, amphibious, peaceful, about the height of a human child when fully grown. They had no military to speak of. They had fishing communities and kelp farms, and a music tradition that researchers from 6 species had spent decades studying. The Orin did not care about any of that. 3 weeks ago, the Orin fleet moved in. 2 weeks ago, the Galactic Council held its first emergency session. 1 week ago, every major species with personnel in the system began pulling them out. The Valorians left first, which surprised nobody. They were elegant and gifted, and they had a saying about not throwing good lives into bad ground. The Dravosi merchants sealed their cargo bays and filed for hazard exemptions. The Han medical team packed their equipment and sent a formal apology note to the Talhari station director, which the director did not have time to read because she was trying to keep 400 of her people alive. Dara and Ren had been assigned to the station 8 months ago as part of a Galactic Relief Corps rotation. Standard posting, supply management, medical coordination, infrastructure support. Quiet work that nobody paid attention to until it stopped happening. Their recall order had come in 6 days ago. Neither of them had left. This was not a dramatic decision. There was no moment of standing at the airlock with a clenched jaw and a speech about duty. Dara had simply read the order, set it aside, and asked Ren if the water filtration unit in Bay 3 was fixed yet. Ren said no. She said to fix it. That was that. Now the Orin had given a final warning. All non-Talhari personnel had 48 hours to evacuate before bombardment intensified. Full station coverage. No exceptions. Dara looked at the 400 Talhari in the lower bay. She looked at the one working transport on the pad, which could move 60 people at a time, and she looked at the list of vessels she had been calling for the past 4 days. Most had not answered. A few had answered and said no. She circled 2 names on the list. 2 Dravosi merchant ships that had not yet cleared the outer marker. She would call them again in the morning. She would offer them something better this time. Ren finished his ration pack and watched her work. He had known Dara for 6 years. He had worked with her on a collapsed mining platform in the Sura Belt, a disease outbreak on the Han Outer Colony, and a 3-week flood response on a Valorian agricultural station, where the Valorians kept trying to manage the relief effort themselves and making it worse. He knew her rhythms. Right now she was in the mode he privately called the engine, quiet, steady, burning at a rate that most people could not sustain and could not match. "You should sleep," he said. "After the water filtration," she said. I told you I'd fix it. You said it wasn't fixed yet. I'll fix it tonight. Then I'll sleep tonight. He did not argue. He picked up his tools and went back down the corridor. Outside, another distant rumble, closer than the last one. The crack in the ceiling extended slightly. A small piece of composite material fell and hit the table next to Dara's forms. She brushed it aside. In the upper council chamber on the Valorian home station, Counselor Sova was reviewing the evacuation logs when her aide flagged something unusual. All non-Talhari personnel had been marked as evacuated. All except 2. Human names, her aide said. Sova looked at the screen. Dara Voss. Ren, still listed as active, still listed as on-site. Why have they not left? She asked. Her aide had no answer. Sova looked at the names for a moment longer than necessary. Then she closed the log and moved on to the next briefing. There were larger things to worry about. 2 humans staying behind in a lost station was not a political matter. She told herself that for the rest of the evening. She did not entirely believe it. The Orin came early. Not 48 hours. 14. Either the warning was never meant to be honored or someone up the chain decided 2 humans and a station full of small amphibious refugees were not worth the courtesy of a full countdown. The first ranging shots hit the outer hull at pre-dawn and blew out the last working power relay on the east side. Dara was already moving. She had not slept. She had spent the night drawing routes on a physical map of the station, old paper, pulled from the station director's office, marking every corridor, every sealed door, every weak point she had learned in 8 months of living there. The routes were already memorized. She had made Ren memorize them too. East Corridor is gone, Ren called from the junction. We use the maintenance tunnels. Already rerouted, Dara said. She was moving groups, 10 Talhari at a time, fast and quiet, down through the lower access tunnels toward the transport pad. The Talhari were frightened, but they followed her. She had a way of moving through chaos that settled the people around her, not because she was loud or commanding, because she was calm. Real calm, not performed calm. The kind that said she had thought through what happened next. The station director, a Talhari elder named Sas, stayed close to Dara and translated her instructions to the groups coming in from the outer shelters. 381 people left to move. 1 working transport. 60 per run. 6 runs minimum. The Dravosi ships were holding at the outer marker. Dara had reached them at dawn and made her offer. Salvage rights to everything left in the station storage bays. 2 full holds of Talhari grain reserves, medical equipment and filtration parts. It was not a small offer. The lead Dravosi captain had said he would think about it. Dara had told him he had until the first shots hit the hull. After that, she could not guarantee the storage bays would still be intact. He had called back in 20 minutes. Now 2 Dravosi heavy haulers were making approach runs, each one able to carry over 100 passengers if you were willing to stack them in cargo space with blankets and portable air supplies. The Talhari were small. It would work. Ren was elsewhere in the building. This was deliberate. While Dara moved people, Ren moved through the parts of the station the Orin boarding parties would use when they arrived. He was not setting traps to kill. That was not the goal, and it was not what they had. What he was doing was slower and more useful. He was making the station difficult. A sealed door here that would take 8 minutes to cut through. A collapsed section of ceiling there, already cracked, needed 1 support pulled that would block the main approach corridor completely. A flooding sequence triggered in the lower maintenance level. 2 feet of water, non-toxic, harmless to the Talhari who were already clear of it, but deeply annoying to Orin soldiers in heavy gear. Every 8 minutes he bought was another 60 Talhari on a transport. The second Orin wave hit the upper hull. Dara felt it through her boots. She kept moving. "Third group is loaded," she said into her comm. "Transport 3 is on approach," the Dravosi captain replied. He sounded like a man doing a job he had not expected to find interesting, and was now finding unexpectedly interesting. The Talhari elder Sas touched Dara's arm during a brief pause in the movement. "Why are you still here?" he asked. His voice was not accusatory, it was genuinely confused. "Your people recalled you, your council did nothing. You have no orders to stay." Dara looked at him. "You have 400 people in this station." "Yes." "Then I have orders." He did not fully understand this. She did not explain further. She pointed to the next group and they started moving again. In the outer corridor, a small Talhari child sat against the wall with her knees pulled up, separated from her group in the shuffle. No more than 5 years old by Talhari reckoning. She was not crying. She was just sitting very still, the way small, frightened things sit when they do not know which direction to run. Dara saw her. She peeled off from the group, scooped the child up in one motion and kept walking. The child grabbed her jacket with both small hands and held on. Dara held on back. "What is her name?" she asked Sas. "Yith," he said. "Is her family in the station?" "I do not know." "Then she stays with me until we find them." Yith did not let go of the jacket. On the upper level, Counselor Sova had opened the live station feed for the second time that morning. She told herself she was monitoring for political implications. She watched Dara move through the smoke and dust of the outer corridors with a child against her shoulder, pointing groups forward with her free hand, completely unhurried. One of Sova's aides said something about contingency votes. Sova did not hear it. She was watching the feed. In his command ship at the edge of the system, Admiral Fen Darak received a field report. 2 human personnel were still active inside the bombardment zone. They were conducting a civilian evacuation. They had apparently coordinated 2 Dravosi vessels without authorization and were systematically moving refugees out of the facility. Fendarik read the report twice. Then he laughed. It was a short sound like a click. "Increase bombardment rate on the outer sections," he said. "Leave the transport pad until the vessels clear, then resume full coverage." His officer confirmed the order. Fendarik set the report aside. 2 people, irrelevant. The station shook again, harder this time. Dara felt it, checked her count. 240 out, 141 remaining. She kept moving. Ren found Dara in the lower access tunnel, with 20 minutes left. He was covered in dust and something gray that might have been ceiling insulation or might have been something worse, and he had a long cut across his left forearm that he had wrapped with a strip of his own sleeve. He looked at Dara. She looked at the cut. He shook his head slightly, which meant it was fine, which meant she moved on. "How many left?" he asked. 43, she said. "Last group is in the tunnel now, 2 more transport runs. Oran boarding parties breached the north entrance 8 minutes ago." "I know, I heard them. They're moving fast." "How fast?" 20 minutes to reach us, maybe less." Dara looked at her count sheet, looked at the tunnel, looked at Ren. "That's enough time." Ren made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "You always say that." "I've always been right." He did not argue. He turned and went back to the junction, because there were still things to do, and 20 minutes was not the same as 30. The Oran boarding party was 6 soldiers in full gear, and they had come expecting nothing. A crumbling station, a few frightened refugees who had not made it out, maybe the 2 stubborn human workers cowering somewhere in the back. Easy work. The kind you sent a junior unit to handle while the real action happened above. What they found instead was a building that had been thoroughly thought about. The first sealed door took them 9 minutes to cut through. Behind it was another sealed door. This one had been welded, not just locked, and the power coupling had been removed entirely, which meant their standard cutter took 12 minutes instead of 3. Behind that was the collapsed ceiling section. Not a natural collapse. Someone had pulled a specific support strut. bringing down exactly the section of roof that blocked the main corridor, at exactly the height that forced the soldiers to either backtrack or crawl through a gap on their hands and knees in full gear. They backtracked. The alternate route took them through the lower maintenance level. 2 feet of water. Non-toxic, as Ren had planned, but the cold and the resistance slowed movement, and the Oran soldiers, built for desert and open-field engagements, did not move well in flooded enclosed spaces. Their communications became patchy. Their unit coordination degraded. By the time they reached the central junction, the station was empty. Not mostly empty, completely empty. Every Talhari civilian gone, both Dravosi ships cleared. The 2 humans gone, the medical supplies gone, the food stores gone, the energy cells, the water filtration units, the spare parts, the tools, the data cores, all of it stripped and loaded while the Oran were cutting through doors. One soldier checked the storage bays, all cleared. Another checked the transport pad, nothing. A third sent a scan through the lower levels, no life signs. The unit commander stood in the main corridor and looked at the water still draining from the maintenance level, and the dust still settling from the ceiling collapse and the empty supply racks, and the fact that his unit had been systematically slowed down by a series of completely non-lethal building modifications made by someone who had clearly thought about exactly where they would walk. He filed his report. In the council chamber, Councillor Sova read the report before Fen Darak's team had even finished writing it. She had a contact in the Oran Outer Communications Network, not a spy, just a trade negotiator who forwarded interesting things. The report was very interesting. 381 Talhari civilians evacuated. 0 casualties. Station stripped of all useful material. Oran boarding party delayed by structural modifications and environmental interference, with 0 weapons involvement. 2 humans. Sova sat with that number for a long time. She pulled up a different file. Human Relief Corps deployment records from the past 11 years. She started reading. She did not stop for 2 hours. Meanwhile, on the Dravosi hauler, Dara sat in a cargo bay surrounded by Talhari refugees wrapped in emergency blankets. Yith had fallen asleep against her arm somewhere during the second transport run and had not moved since. Dara let her sleep. Ren sat across from her, arm rewrapped properly now, eating his second ration pack of the day. "We're going to be formally reprimanded," he said. "Probably," Dara agreed. Ignoring a recall order. Unauthorized use of Dravosi commercial vessels, conducting an unsanctioned operation in an active Oran bombardment zone. That's a solid list. You're not concerned. Dara looked at the sleeping child against her arm, then at the rows of Talhari around them, quiet now, exhausted but alive. "No," she said. Ren nodded slowly. He looked at the same thing she was looking at. After a while he said, 381. 381, Dara confirmed. The Dravosi captain's voice came over the cargo speaker, blunt and businesslike. "We're clearing the system boundary. Oran are not following. You made it." A few of the Talhari who were still awake looked up when they heard that. Sas, the elder, sat near the far wall with his eyes closed. He opened them when the announcement came. He looked at Dara across the cargo bay. She gave him a small nod. He closed his eyes again. On his command ship, Fen Darak read the updated field report and was no longer laughing. He read the part about the stripped storage bays 3 times. He had planned to use that station as a forward resupply point. Everything he needed was gone. He wrote his own report to High Command. He described the human operation as unexpectedly disruptive and recommended that intelligence compile a more thorough profile of Human Relief Corps operational methodology. His superior wrote back in less than an hour. "Stop worrying about 2 people." Fen Darak stared at that reply for a long time. He did not delete it. He filed it somewhere he could find later. Sova read the file twice and then started over from the beginning. She had pulled the full Human Relief Corps deployment records, not just the Talhari posting, all of them. 53 years of records going back to the year humanity first received Galactic Observer status, long before full membership, back when humans were still considered a minor curiosity from a mid-range solar system with no psionic capacity and no political weight. The records were not exciting reading. That was the point. They were repetitive. They were full of low-priority postings in systems where nothing important was happening. Flood response, disease containment, structural collapse, crop failure, conflict evacuation, low-stakes work, the kind of work that did not produce commendations or political recognition, the kind of work that other species agencies quietly declined when the posting was too far out or too dangerous or too poorly funded. Humans showed up for all of it. Not always in large numbers. Sometimes one team. Sometimes 2 or 3 people in a station the size of a freight container. But they showed up, and they stayed until the job was done, and they left nothing unfinished. Sova found 17 separate instances in the records where human personnel had explicitly ignored or delayed responding to a recall order because civilians were still present in the operational zone. In 15 of those instances, no formal disciplinary action had been taken, because by the time the paperwork was reviewed, the outcome had been good enough that no one wanted to make it official. She put the file down, picked it up again. On the other side of the council floor, 3 species with borders adjacent to Orin space had filed formal security requests in the past 48 hours. The Han, the Vel, and a smaller collective called the Serosi. All 3 wanted assurances. The council was preparing a statement. It was the kind of statement that used words like monitoring and expressing concern, which was political language for doing nothing while sounding like something. Sova had written 3 of those statements herself over the years. She was very good at them. Right now, she could not remember why she had thought they were sufficient. The Orin push into the Talhari system had not slowed. 2 of the 3 major Talhari population centers were under occupation. The third was holding barely, with nothing more than terrain and time. There was no military aid coming. The council statement would be finalized and released, and the Orin would continue, and eventually the Talhari system would simply become Orin territory, and the council would adjust its maps and file the whole affair under resolved. Sova knew this pattern. She had seen it 4 times in her career. It worked exactly the same every time. What was different this time was a transmission she had received that morning from an unexpected source. The lead captain of the Dravosi hauler that had extracted the Talhari refugees. He had not sent it to the council. He had sent it directly to Sova's personal diplomatic frequency, which meant he had gone to some effort to find it. The message was short. Dravosi communication tended toward efficiency. Thought you should know, we talked. In the cargo bay on the way out. The human woman didn't ask for thanks, she asked for names. She wanted to know every surviving family unit in that bay and whether they had other families still in the system. She had a list going before we cleared the system boundary. In 40 years of transit work, I've carried a lot of relief crews. I've never seen one doing intake interviews during active bombardment evac. Thought you should know. Pass it on if it's useful. Sova had read that message 7 times. On the human homeworld, a very different kind of meeting was happening. General Brick sat behind a plain desk in a plain office and read Dara's full after-action report. Bricks was old by any standard, with a face that had been weathered by decades of decisions that were never clean or simple. He read slowly. He did not skim. When he finished, he set the report down and sat quietly for a moment. Then he made one call. It was a short call, 3 minutes. When it ended, he opened his desk and took out a form that had not been used in 22 years, a formal billing statement for services rendered by human personnel in galactic crisis zones during periods of council non-intervention. He began filling it out. The number it eventually reached was very large. It covered every human hour and every low-priority posting that other species had declined. Every medical supply paid for out of human relief corps budget. Every transport, every rebuilt water filtration unit, every collapsed ceiling that a human engineer had shored up in a station that the Council had never formally endorsed supporting. He worked on it for 4 hours. Then he submitted it directly to the Council floor. Meanwhile, the Dravosi Trade Network was doing what Dravosi Trade Networks did. Word moved. Not official channels, not diplomatic communiques, just merchants talking the way they always had. The story of the Talhari station moved through 11 transit hubs in 6 days. It changed slightly in each telling, the way all stories do, but the core of it stayed the same. 2 humans, an empty station, 381 people out. A boarding party, walking through a building that had already been thought about. The Dravosi had a saying. It had been used before, occasionally, for individuals. This was the first time it was being applied to an entire species. Roughly translated, the quiet ones. On a neutral world settlement, Yith was handed to a surviving ant who had been separated during the first Orin advance 3 weeks prior. The reunion happened in a medical intake line. No ceremony, just a child recognizing a face and a sound coming out of her that was too large for her small body. The ant held her and could not speak. Dara stood 2 steps back and let it happen. Sova was watching the settlement feeds as part of her standard monitoring brief. She saw it, the whole thing, the child, the ant, the human woman standing 2 steps back with her hands in her jacket pockets, looking away to give them the moment. Sova's aide asked if she was ready to approve the council statement draft. She said not yet. The human fleet did not announce itself. No declaration, no broadcast on the open council frequency, no dramatic emergence from transit with weapons charged and a speech prepared. 41 ships dropped out of transit at the edge of Orin space and simply held position. Quiet, still, like they had all the time available to them and had already decided how this was going to go. Fen Darak received the proximity alert and felt the first thing he had felt toward humans in this entire campaign that was not amusement. It was not yet fear, but it was adjacent to something he could not immediately name. He pulled the recognition data, human military vessels, mid-range class most of them, nothing that matched Orin tonnage. No ship in that fleet should have been a match for his front line in a straight engagement. He told himself this. He almost fully believed it. Then the transmission came. Not addressed to the Council, not addressed to the galaxy, addressed to Fen Darak specifically by name and rank, which meant someone had done their research. The transmission was a list. Not threats, not demands, just a list. Every crisis zone in the past 50 years where human personnel had operated in the absence of Council support. 47 entries. Each one included the species affected, the nature of the crisis, the number of humans deployed, and the outcome. No editorializing, no emotional language, just entries one after another, building in weight the longer you read. Then a second list, much shorter, what the Orin had taken, what they had destroyed, the Talhari population centers, the kelp farms, the music archive at the third settlement, which 6 species of researchers had spent decades building and which was now gone because it had been in a building the Orin used for a forward command post and then abandoned. Then 2 words. Step back. Fen Darak read the transmission in full. Then he called his fleet commanders and told them to engage. The battle was not clean, and it was not fast, and it did not go the way anyone watching from the outside would have predicted based on tonnage and firepower comparisons. The Orin outmassed the human fleet significantly. In any standard engagement model, the outcome should not have been close. The engagement was close. The human fleet did not fight like species that were new to conflict. They fought like species that had spent 20 years reading every available report on Orin military engagements, and had written detailed analysis on Orin tactical patterns, response times, formation behavior, and the specific conditions under which Orin commanders tended to overextend. That analysis had been sitting in human military archives, unread by everyone else, because no one had considered humanity worth monitoring closely enough to wonder what they were studying. Orin formations that should have been decisive were not. Human ships moved in ways that cut Orin coordination lines precisely at the junctions where Orin units were designed to link up. It looked almost like prediction. It was not. It was homework. Ren was not in the battle formation. He was on a military engineering vessel held back at the support line, which was exactly where someone with his specific skills was most useful. When 3 Orin cruisers attempted a flanking run around the human left edge, Ren's vessel moved to intercept, not with weapons, but with a signal disruption method he had developed and field-tested and written a detailed technical report on during a posting that no one at command had read until Brix reviewed it 6 days ago. All 3 cruisers lost propulsion coherence within 4 minutes. They did not explode. They just stopped being useful. In the council chamber, Sova stood at the observation feed and did not speak for a long time. Around her, other counselors were talking fast. The Han representative wanted to send a formal message of support. 2 other species were quietly repositioning their fleets, not to engage, just to be visible, just to make it clear that the calculation was shifting. Sova was not watching the fleet movements. She was watching the casualty reports coming in from the human vessels. They were taking hits. Some were serious. The humans were bleeding for this. They were doing it anyway, and they were doing it for a species most of the council had not considered worth a vote 3 weeks ago. She thought about the list, 47 entries. She thought about what she had voted for and against, across 47 of those entries. The battle turned at the 6-hour mark, not because the Orin were broken, but because 3 of Fen Derek's fleet commanders were reporting that their tactical models were not working, and they had no good explanation for why, and because the Han fleet had now moved to a visible position at the system boundary, and because the Dravosi Trade Consortium had filed emergency contract terminations with every Orin-adjacent operation they ran, which was not a military action, but was a significant economic one, and because the Council had finally, after 6 hours of watching humans bleed, issued something stronger than a concerned statement. Fen Derek called for a ceasefire. Brix received the request and did not answer it. He let the Orin wait. 6 full hours. His staff asked if they should respond. He told them to let the fleet hold position and give him the time to finish reading the latest casualty report thoroughly, because every name in it deserved that much. After 6 hours, he sent a single line back to Fen Derek. "We'll talk on our terms in our time." Fen Derek accepted. On the support vessel, Ren sat in the engineering bay and stared at the wall for a while after the ceasefire notification came through. Then he calmed Dara on the neutral world settlement. She picked up on the second signal. "It's done," he said. A pause, then, 381 and counting, she said. He understood exactly what she meant. Yith found Dara sitting on a supply crate outside the intake tents. It had been 4 days since the ceasefire. The neutral world settlement was still busy, new arrivals every few hours, aid teams from 3 species finally showing up now that it was safe, council observers filing reports, everyone very engaged now that the hard part was over. Dara had been in the intake queue since early morning, doing the same work she always did, matching names to family lists, moving supplies where they were needed, fixing things that broke. She was eating a ration pack and staring at nothing in particular when Yith came around the corner of the tent and sat down next to her on the crate without asking permission. Dara looked at her, Yith looked back. She was cleaned up now, had a proper jacket that fit her, donated by someone. Her aunt was 20 meters away inside the tent, talking to a hand medical coordinator. Yith had apparently decided that was boring. "Why did you come back?" Yith asked. Her human speech was very new and very careful, each word placed like a stone being set down. She had been learning for 4 days with the kind of single-minded focus that children sometimes have for things they decide matter. Dara thought about the question. She took it seriously because Yith was asking it seriously. "Because nobody else did," she said. Yith thought about this for a while. Then she nodded as if she was filing it. The ceasefire had held. The negotiations had taken 2 days and Brix had conducted them with the same pace he did everything, deliberate, unhurried, giving nothing away free. The Orin pulled back from the remaining Talhari population center. Full withdrawal from 3 occupied settlements was still being arranged, but the terms were in writing and the council had formally agreed to monitor compliance, which was a harder commitment than they usually made. The political cost to the Orin had become too high to absorb, not just militarily. The Dravosi cancellations had hit 8 separate Orin trade routes. 2 smaller species who had been quietly deferring to Orin pressure for years had stopped deferring. The council censure, which was still mostly symbolic, had shifted the public position of 4 member species who had previously stayed neutral. It was not a total victory. The Talhari had lost 2 population centers, a generation of agricultural infrastructure, and a cultural archive that could never be fully rebuilt. No ceasefire fixed that, but the 3rd center held. That was something. Dara was honest with herself that it was not everything. She was also honest that it was more than it would have been. Sova had requested a private meeting with Brix 3 days after the ceasefire. She had taken a shuttle to the neutral station where he was still managing the withdrawal monitoring. She came alone. Brix received her in the same plain office setup he used everywhere. No ceremony. He offered her a chair. She sat. She told him she was sorry. She did not dress it in political language or surround it with conditions. She said the council's inaction had been wrong, that her vote against intervention had been wrong, and that she had looked at the records of what human personnel had been doing across the past 5 decades, and she did not have a good answer for why the council had never formally acknowledged any of it. Brix listened to all of it. He did not make it easy, which she had expected. He asked her 2 questions, both of them direct, both of them about specific entries in the deployment records where council decisions had made human operations harder. She answered both questions honestly. Then he said, "Accepted." Not warmly, but not coldly either, simply as a statement of fact. The apology had been made and received, and now they could move to the next thing. The next thing was the session. Humanities Council representative stood up at the floor session 4 days after the ceasefire and spoke for less than 5 minutes. No triumph in it. No list of grievances performed for an audience. Just a clear and simple statement that the pattern of galactic silence in places like the Talhari system had a cost, that humanity had been absorbing that cost for 50 years, and that they would no longer be the only species expected to show up when everyone else voted no. The silence in the chamber after that was the kind that meant something. The Rapid Response Charter passed with 9 votes, which was more than anyone had expected. It was not perfect. Sova knew better than to call it sufficient. But it was a formal mechanism, written into council law, that said a vote to do nothing was no longer the automatic default when a non-member species faced existential threat. The charter was named after the Talhari station's official registry designation, a long code of numbers and letters that meant nothing to anyone who had not looked it up. No speeches about the naming, no ceremony. It was put into the record, and that was that. The people who knew what it referred to knew. The rest would learn eventually. Dara was offered a military commission the week after the ceasefire. A formal letter, proper rank, decent assignment. She read it and set it on the table next to her current stack of intake forms. She re-enlisted with the Relief Corps. Ren was not surprised. He asked her if she had even thought about it. She said she had thought about it for about 4 seconds. He said that tracked. She said it was a perfectly good 4 seconds. They were already assigned to the next posting before the week was out. A hand agricultural station in a border system where 3 consecutive storms had destroyed the local water infrastructure. Quiet work, the kind nobody paid attention to. Yith sent a message 2 weeks after Dara shipped out. It had clearly taken her a long time to write. The human script was slow and deliberate and slightly uneven, each letter shaped with care. When Dara opened it, she read it once. Then she folded her tablet closed and slipped it into her jacket pocket and went back to the water filtration unit she was in the middle of fixing. 2 words. Thank you. Somewhere across the galaxy, a newly appointed Oran diplomat was receiving his first full briefing on species profiles. Standard intake material. When they reached humanity, the young diplomat asked his senior colleague what he should know about humans. The colleague thought for a moment. "They are the ones who stay," he said. The diplomat wrote it down.